Qantas has a fleet of 12 Airbus A380s, half of which were just refurbished before all were sent to long-term storage after the pandemic hit. Will Qantas bring back the double-decker and how does it fit into the rest of their fleet? Let's talk aviation. Due to the geography of Australia and close neighbouring islands, Qantas' fleet is designed to operate two types of flight: single-aisle and on busier routes, smaller dual-aisle aircraft for national flights and bigger wide-body aircraft for intercontinental flights. Furthermore, in 2020, 2/3 of the population of Australia lived in one of 6 major cities, with almost half of the population living in either Sydney or Melbourne. This meant that it was way easier for an airline like Qantas to fill their planes, as most planes operated on high-demand routes and the market is very concentrated into a few areas. Especially in contrast with Europe and the United States, where there are a lot of relatively smaller cities with a lot of demand between them. This could be one of the reasons that the Airbus A380 is working out better for Qantas than it was for the European carriers like Air France, British Airways and Lufthansa. Before we look into the future, we need to understand the past. And historically, Qantas has been an avid user of the Boeing 747 and even was an all Boeing 747 user, the only in the world between 1979 and 1985. Over the years that follows, Qantas expanded operations and added the Boeing 767 to its fleet. During the privatization of both Qantas and Australian Airlines, the companies were merged, and in 1993, Qantas now owned a large number of 737s. The airline was growing, and besides its intercontinental network, they operated a sizable portion of all domestic flights in Australia. Going to 2001, the company announced that it would add the Airbus A380 to its fleet of jumbo jets and placed an order for 12 aircraft. The next year, the airline was no longer an all-Boeing airline, but a delivery of their first A380. And during these years, Qantas was also in talks with Boeing to help design their new 777 airliner. However, they never ordered it. They went with the aforementioned A330 and A380 instead. While it is hard to point to a specific reason for the decision, there has been much speculation. There have been comments made by Qantas executives on the size of the aircraft and it being too large for domestic operations, and that the A380 would be a better fit for intercontinental flights. Also, by the time they decided not to go forward with the 777, they announced that they would buy another 6 Boeing 747 aircraft instead. This would point to a fleet commonality as a reason. It is no secret that operating as few different aircraft as possible is generally a good move. However, not much later they went on to order 2 different Airbus aircraft. We will probably never know exactly why Qantas changed their mind on the Boeing 777, but one thing is certain. Looking back, it likely would have been a better choice to go with this 777 instead of the A380. And examining their fleet before the pandemic, it consisted of surprisingly few different types of aircraft for their size. For their long-haul fleets, they operated a combination of Airbus A330s, A380s, and Boeing 747s and 787s. And for their short-haul operations, they used the Boeing 737-800 as only single-aisle aircraft. In 2019, they announced they have ordered 36 Airbus A321s XLRs, partly to expand their network and operations. However, with an aging fleet of 737s, it's likely that these will be replaced in part by the A321. This was not the only aircraft order they worked on around that time. In 2017, Qantas started work on Project Sunrise. The goal was to start operating non-stop flights from the Australian East Coast, being Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane, to destinations all around the world. While it is still unclear when the first flights will be operated, destinations include London, Paris and Frankfurt in Europe, New York and Chicago in the USA, Cape Town in South Africa and Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. These could become their most profitable flights, as the already existing direct flight between London Heathrow and Perth was their most profitable international route before the pandemic. When most restrictions are lifted, Qantas expects that travellers will still favour a direct flight over one with a layover. Before the pandemic hit, Qantas announced that they had chosen the Airbus A350 as the aircraft of choice, putting it above the Boeing 777X. Again, they choose an Airbus aircraft over the 777. There has never been an exact explanation on why they had chosen the Airbus, but at the time of the decision, at the end of 2019, the Airbus A350 was already in the air for a couple of years without many issues, and the 777X was still in development. As of today, there are still many questions on when and in what capacity the 777X will start flying, and Boeing plans the first deliveries for 2024. However, there is some speculation on why the A350 was chosen over the 777X. Main factors include fuel efficiency and the increased takeoff weight of the Airbus thanks to an extra fuel tank. On the other hand, Boeing is said to have offered a steep discount on the 777X if Qantas had taken their bid. However, in hindsight, Airbus had a great ace up their sleeve for Qantas. They offered Qantas a grace period. They could take their time with signing the contract and making the first payments. When the pandemic hit, this meant that Qantas was able to put the entire project on hold indefinitely without very few extra costs. What will the future look like for the project? This is of course hard to say with the strict rules the Australian government had put in place to keep the virus away from the island as much as possible and limit travel to a minimum. However, just a few weeks ago, they announced that they were looking at December of this year to start operating flights again to a number of countries including Japan, the US and the UK. This could open the door to finally greenlight the project, and it is also confirmed by their CEO, Alan Joyce. He hopes to put the final go at their last no-go point next year. While their plans are still to order the A350, they can choose otherwise. Coming back to the A380, what will the future be of this aircraft at Qantas? As I've discussed before, the long-range, long-haul flights to large business hubs have been one of the most profitable routes for Qantas. Furthermore, they invested heavily in their aircraft. Right before international travel was shut down, Qantas was in the middle of a large project to refit all their A380s, and currently half of them have been refitted. Just a couple of weeks ago, the seventh of their fleet was flown over from the desert to Dresden to get the update as well. This is a strong indicator that Qantas is still committed to more than a couple of their double-deckers coming back into operations. Just a few days later, they indeed announced that they would take the A380 back into operations. While not all 12 of them will come back, 10 should be in the air by 2024 and the first as early as 2022. I think Qantas made a questionable decision choosing the A380 over the 777. However, due to the geography of Australia, they are able to make it work out for them. And I foresee little issues when they bring back the A380 on their long-haul flights. There should be enough room in the market to operate it next to their non-stop flights, which are part of Project Sunrise. I believe this project will go ahead and become a real profit maker for the airline. What are your thoughts on the Qantas fleet? Do you agree with me that despite their odd choices here and there, they will still have a bright future ahead? What are your opinions on Project Sunrise? Would you ever take a 20+ hour flight? Let me know in the comments below. I look forward to hearing what you think. Thank you for watching, and please consider subscribing to Let's Talk Aviation.